create a business around. Anything else, you're in for a world of hurt. And yes, books, KDP books are assets, they're digital assets, they spin off cash, so don't worry, you are in the right game already. There is no need to be negative. The summary is literally just make sure you own some assets that are going to get pumped up in value by all of these government stimulus checks and also increase your income to make sure you're beating the inflation rate, which realistically is probably about 8%. Yo, what is going on, and welcome to the Residual Royalty Academy. In this video, it's going to be a bit of a deep economics lesson, a bit of a financial macro education. Maybe for some of you, you already know all this stuff, but maybe for some of you, it's going to be brand new. So I hope you can learn something. And of course, none of this is financial advice. Do not make any decisions based off of this information. However, during times of universal deceit, as George Orwell says, and I don't think this is verbatim, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. So we're going to be discussing how quantitative easing, QE, affected KDP and how it makes the poor people poorer and how it makes the rich people richer. And this is what I believe to be true. This could not be true, but this is obviously my opinion and obviously not financial advice. But let's start off by saying, or by defining, what is QE, what is quantitative easing. So if you hadn't noticed, early last year there was a bit of a economic crash because of this virus that was going around, and in response to this, because everybody kind of stopped spending, everybody was inside, the economy kind of went flat and everybody panicked. The economy went into this kind of bad recession, and in order to save the economy, what the central bank and the governments did was they just printed more money in order to kind of stimulate the economy. That's essentially what happened. However, this does not go without consequences and effects. So what this printing of money ultimately and eventually does is it devalues the currency, right? So let's say you had 100 apples, right? And there was the same amount of people who wanted those apples. If you then bring another 1,000 apples to the market, then those apples are less valuable because there's the same amount of people, but there's like way too many apples and people don't value it as much. It's less scarce, so it's seen as less valuable. And this causes inflation where prices of goods rise. And it also means that people who are holding cash in their bank account, for example, and not owning assets, they lose some purchasing power. And we're going to go into this in a bit more detail in just a second. But before I carry on reading any of this, let's actually look at how much money was printed. So this is a graph of the M2 money supply. I don't know the difference between M2 and M1. Maybe you can actually look into this yourself. But this graph just kind of shows how much money was printed during the early parts of 2020 and throughout even the start of 2021. So you can see the money being printed was kind of at like a normal speed, just going at a normal speed. And then you can see the percentage increase was way more in the middle and the start of 2020, and ultimately that just means there's way more money in the economy. So you can see here on this website, it says more than 35% of US dollars ever printed or ever in circulation were made in 2020 alone. And like I say, this causes inflation. So let's go back onto here now. So therefore, because the money is losing its purchasing power, if you had, let's say, 100k in a bank account last year, from year to year, the purchasing power decreases, which means, yeah, you'll still have the 100k. It's still going to say 100k in the bank, but that's going to buy you less and less every year. So, for example, I think in the past, my grandparents bought a house and it was like £6,000, right? And there's nowhere now you can buy a house for £6,000. That's just because the purchasing power of the currency, it doesn't matter which currency, like they all pretty much do the same thing, is always decreasing over time. So this demonstrates the importance of investing and consistently increasing your income. But before we look actually at these calculations here, let's actually look at how much inflation was. So inflation is currently estimated to be about 5%, right? This is June 2021. So this is pretty up to date, right? So that means that like from here to June 2020, it means goods cost roughly 5% more. So that's like when you go to buy a car, when you go to buy a house, when you go to buy food in a shop, they're saying that it's about 5%, but realistically they always like underestimate it. So when they say it's 2, it's probably 4. When they say it's 5, it means it's probably like 8, right? And even recently, the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jay Powell, who we'll get onto in a minute, admitted that the true inflation is probably considerably higher than 5%, but he didn't say how much. Let's just call it 8%, right? Because some of the banks, I think it was like Goldman Sachs, they increased their base salaries for their employees by 8%. So let's just say it's 8%, which is probably realistic. This has some big consequences. So if your income stayed flat over the last year, with that same amount of money, you can buy 8% less things with it. You can buy 8% less goods and services with it. And to look at the calculation in another way, as I've written here, in a 12-month time frame or 12-month period, you have an extra month of cost because 1 divided by 12 is 8%. So unless your income on your salary has increased by 8%, you're actually losing out and you're actually getting poorer or less purchasing power over time. And that's also why the food packaging, the amount of crisps in the packet gets smaller, the amount of biscuits in the packet gets smaller, or the price just goes up. There's that old meme in England with the price of the Freddo. It used to be like, 17 pence, and it's now like something like 40, 50 pence, right? But now actually let's look at these calculations because these are really important, and this is kind of the main important thing. So let's say inflation is 8%. Let's just assume it's 8%. If a year ago you bought like $100,000 house, the average single family home in America last year went up by like 20 or 25%. The house prices essentially went up by 20 to 25%, meaning that $100,000 house is now probably worth 120 or 125,000. If you had bought technology stocks, like for example Nasdaq, or for example Tesla, or some other type of technology stocks and shares, that is, they on average went up like by around 40%, which means that $100,000 worth of stocks became $140,000. So from this calculation, you can see that the rich are getting richer because they own assets or businesses, and the poor are getting poorer because they only have liabilities or they don't own these assets. And the poor person, obviously the guy who has 100k in cash isn't poor, but this is just for example's sake, the person who held the cash and didn't have assets, that 100k is now 92 because you've got 100 minus 8, right? So the guy who had the stocks has 140 minus 8, so he'd have like 132, and this guy would have, let's say, 112 if you minus the 8% as well. So hopefully that is not too confusing, and I don't actually have a solution for this. Like, I'm not saying the government shouldn't do this. I don't have a better idea. I'm just saying that by making investments that will be benefited from the money printing, then you're going to do well. Furthermore, the money printing actually benefited us by people having more money to spend on products online, such as books on Amazon, which therefore indirectly increases our royalties. But the overall summary of this video is just to make sure you own like some stocks, for example, some real estate, some gold, and obviously increase your income. And now we're going to look, actually finally before we go, at this graph, right? So this is over like 120, 117 years roughly. So this is a graph that shows the value of currency against gold. So this is the old German currency that ultimately went to zero. You can see that in 1925, that was a German currency. This is the yen. This is, I think is this another German currency? I'm not sure. Oh, is this another one? I don't know. But there you go. You got the euro, the sterling, and I'm not sure where the dollar is on that one. But you can see here, this is the purchasing power of the dollar over 100 years, and it just goes like from 100 to 5 cents. So that's really getting absolutely killed. And there's a lot of funny memes about this kind of thing. You can find these on Instagram pages, on YouTube, and we can even just watch this one now.
Yes, we did. That's another way to simply flooded the system with money. Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills, bonds, or other government-guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that to the Federal Reserve Bank.
So that's like the whole Federal Reserve meme. Another quote here: "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there will be a revolution tomorrow morning." And it's also not just the price of like stocks and these things that increase. You can even see, for example, during last year, the price of lumber, which is wood. Look how much that's increased, right? So this is like coronavirus. It kind of crashed, and then all the money gets printed, and it just goes all the way up here, and now it's settled around like 600, which is still way higher than it was previously down there, where the economy actually probably should be. It just shows how like the economy is not actually related to the stock market because of the money printing going on. But yeah, for further resources, further reading, I recommend Robert Kiyosaki videos, podcasts. He's a bit of a doomsday guy, but yeah, he's very good with that kind of thing. And also this guy on Twitter, Real Estate G6, he says here, reminder, there are only 3 acceptable careers moving forward. Everything else is a disaster. 1, any skill that creates an asset, any skill that buys and sells assets, or any standalone skill you can create a business around. Anything else, you're in for a world of hurt. And yes, books, KDP books are assets, they're digital assets, they spin off cash, so don't worry, you are in the right game already. There is no need to be negative. The summary is literally just make sure you own some assets that are going to get pumped up in value by all of these government stimulus checks, and also increase your income to make sure you're beating the inflation rate, which realistically is probably about 8%. So I hope that was not too confusing. I hope made it clear what was going on. And of course, it's not financial advice, but make sure you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.